The air in the attic felt too still, like it was holding its breath. Dust floated in thin silver streams through the cracked window, settling on forgotten trunks and frames wrapped in yellowed sheets. Evelyn's footsteps were soft, careful, the kind people take when they sense they're not alone. Beneath an old blanket, her fingers found glass. Cold, smooth, unbroken. She lifted the cloth and saw it. A mirror rimmed in tarnished gold, its surface faintly breathing with her reflection. But as she stared, her own eyes blinked a fraction too late. The reflection lingered, moved differently, and in that strange second, Evelyn saw herself standing by candlelight, her mouth open in a silent scream that had not yet happened. She stepped back, heart trembling, the attic whispering around her. What if tomorrow is already watching? That night, Evelyn sat by the attic door, with a candle flickering low, unable to stop thinking about the reflection that moved on its own. She tried to convince herself it was exhaustion, a trick of the light, a shadow bent by her thoughts. But when the wind pressed against the house, the floorboards above creaked softly, as if someone was pacing in the attic. The sound came in measured steps, slow and patient. She thought of her grandmother's voice, calm and distant, telling her as a child that some mirrors keep secrets for the dead. Evelyn rose, candle trembling in her hand, and whispered into the silence, "Claire, are you still here?" The attic answered with a faint, metallic hum, and the mirror seemed to sigh from behind the ceiling door. By morning, Evelyn found herself sitting at her kitchen table, staring into a cup of untouched tea gone cold. She had dreamt of the mirror. Or perhaps the mirror had dreamt of her. In the dream, her reflection smiled and whispered a warning she couldn't remember. Jonas stopped by, as he often did on Saturdays, with his usual grin and a stack of papers tucked under his arm. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he joked. But the laughter faded when he saw her expression. She told him about the attic, the reflection, the scream that hadn't yet come. Jonas, ever the skeptic, leaned forward and said softly, "Then let's go see it together." They climbed the attic steps together, Jonas carrying a lantern that flickered with each hesitant step. The air was colder now, heavy with stillness. When they reached the top, the mirror waited exactly where Evelyn had left it. Only now, its surface was faintly fogged, as if something had breathed upon it. Jonas approached first, his voice a whisper of disbelief. "It's just glass, Eve." But as he leaned closer, the fog shifted and showed him standing beside Evelyn in the same moment. Yet, in the reflection, his eyes were bleeding tears of black. Jonas staggered back, pale, his lantern swinging wildly. "It's showing me," he began, but the mirror pulsed once, and the attic went silent again. They left the attic door closed that night, but neither of them found sleep. Jonas sat by the window, staring into the black sky, while Evelyn listened to the rhythmic creaks above, each one sounding like a heartbeat. When she finally dozed, she dreamt again of her reflection, now whispering words she could almost hear. Tomorrow night. She woke before dawn. The candle burned down to wax tears on the floor, and in the quiet, she heard Jonas murmur from across the room, "What if it's trying to show us something we can stop?" She looked at him, her voice trembling, or something that already knows will fail. The morning air was thick with quiet. Evelyn stood by the attic door, her hand resting on the cold brass handle, as if touching the silence itself. Jonas had gone to fetch his camera, convinced that evidence might explain what reason could not. She whispered to herself, to the mirror, perhaps, that she would not look again. But when the faint hum began behind the ceiling boards, like a sigh too soft to belong to wind, she found herself climbing the stairs. The attic greeted her as if expecting her return. The mirror no longer waited. It watched. The reflection within it shimmered like water, and through it she saw her own back turned, standing before the same mirror tomorrow night. Jonas returned, his camera bag slung over his shoulder, and a spark of stubborn faith burning behind his weary eyes. He set up his tripod near the mirror, muttering about exposure and proof, while Evelyn sat on the floor, knees pulled close, watching him in silence. "If it shows tomorrow," he said, adjusting the lens, "then tomorrow we'll see what it means." The mirror's surface flickered faintly, catching his reflection twice, one standing still, one moving closer, whispering something into Evelyn's ear. She flinched. Jonas turned, seeing nothing but her pale face. "Eve?" he asked softly. "Did it just speak to you?" Her answer trembled. "It remembered my name." That night, the footage refused to stay still. The camera had caught everything. Or, rather, something had caught it. Each time Jonas replayed the recording, the reflection's movements shifted slightly. In one frame, Evelyn looked into the mirror. In the next, her reflection turned toward the camera with hollow eyes. He froze the tape, breath heavy, and said, "It's changing." The reflection's rewriting itself. Evelyn watched the static flicker across his laptop screen, feeling the cold crawl up her arms. "Maybe it's not showing tomorrow," she whispered. "Maybe it's showing what it wants tomorrow to be." Unable to bear the added silence, they carried the mirror down into the parlor, setting it against the far wall beside Clara's old piano. The house felt heavier, as though the walls strained to listen. Evelyn lit candles to soften the shadows, but each flame bent toward the mirror, drawn by an unseen pull. Jonas tested its edge with his flashlight, the beam fading halfway through the reflection. "It's swallowing light," he murmured. Evelyn reached out once more, not to touch, but to understand. Her hand hovered an inch from the glass, where the air pulsed softly, like the breath of something alive. That night, they kept watch beside the mirror, too afraid to sleep. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft ticking of the old clock. Then, just before dawn, the mirror's reflection shifted, showing them both asleep in the same room, while behind their sleeping forms, a shadow moved. It was tall, bent, and faceless, reaching toward Evelyn's resting shoulder. Jonas reached out to cover the glass, his hand trembling. "If that's tomorrow," he said in a breath, "we can't let it come." But Evelyn stared at the reflection and whispered, "It's already happening." Evelyn dreamt of the mirror again, only this time she was inside it. The air around her felt thick, like breathing through memory. She walked through a corridor made entirely of reflections, each wall showing pieces of her life rearranged, moments out of order, faces watching her that she could no longer name. Somewhere behind her, the soft sound of piano keys echoed, one note repeating endlessly. "You shouldn't have looked," her grandmother's voice whispered, not with anger, but sorrow. Evelyn turned toward the sound, and in the shimmer ahead, she saw Jonas asleep at the real mirror's base, his reflection slowly standing up without him. Jonas woke with a start, drenched in cold sweat. The mirror stood before him, still and silent. Yet he swore he'd seen Evelyn inside it a moment before, her hand pressed against the other side. He rushed to wake her, but she wouldn't stir. Her pulse fluttered faintly beneath his fingers, her eyelids moving as though she were watching something behind them. "Evelyn!" he called, voice cracking. The mirror's surface darkened to a smoky gray, and for a heartbeat, her face appeared within it, whispering something he couldn't hear. He placed his hand on the glass, his reflection fading until only hers remained. Inside the dream, Evelyn walked toward the sound of the piano. The melody was simple, almost childlike, but each note echoed with the hollow ache of memory. She followed it until she came upon a small room, her grandmother's parlor, perfectly preserved. Clara sat by the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. "You brought it down, didn't you?" Clara asked softly, not turning around. The mirror wanted to see again. Evelyn knelt beside her, trembling. "How do I stop it?" she asked. Clara looked up finally, her reflection visible in every key. "You can't," she whispered. "You can only learn what it shows." before it learns you. Jonas, desperate, opened every book Clara had left behind. Her notes were written in a looping, elegant hand. Diary entries mixed with warnings. The mirror shows the moment you fear most. One line, read. And when you look again, it gives that fear a name. He looked up at Evelyn, still unconscious beside the mirror, her face peaceful but pale. Then he saw it. Faint words forming on the mirror's glass, traced by invisible fingers. You already looked. The lantern beside him flickered once, then went out. The room fell into a darkness that seemed to breathe. In the mirrored dream, Evelyn finally reached the end of the corridor. Before her stood a door made of glass, pulsing with faint light. She could see Jonas through it, his hand on the mirror's surface, his lips moving in silence. "Jonas," she called, pressing her palm against the glass. The world quivered, as if both realities strained to touch. Cracks spidered across the mirrored door, spreading from her hand like veins of light. "You can't save me," she whispered. "But maybe you can wake me." The cracks grew brighter, humming like music, and then, with one breathless second between them, the mirror shattered inward. The sound of shattering still echoed long after the mirror had broken. Evelyn gasped awake on the attic floor, shards of glass glittering around her like frozen raindrops. Jonas knelt beside her, relief and fear tangled in his trembling breath. "You're back," he whispered. She nodded faintly, but her gaze was fixed on the largest fragment before her. It was still reflecting something that wasn't the room they were in. Inside the shard, candlelight flickered over two sleeping figures, and a faceless shadow bent low beside them. "Jonas," she said softly. "It didn't break. It multiplied." They gathered the fragments carefully, each piece pulsing faintly in their palms. Jonas laid them out on a blanket, arranging them like a puzzle, but the images in each never aligned. Some showed the attic, others a parlor, long gone. Others, unfamiliar faces staring back. "These aren't reflections," Jonas murmured. "They're windows." Evelyn touched one, feeling warmth under her fingertips. For an instant, she saw Clara standing behind her, whispering through the glass, "You opened too many doors." Evelyn's heart pounded. She dropped the shard, and it rolled toward the others, humming softly until the room filled with a low, harmonic sound like a slow heartbeat. That night, Evelyn couldn't stop hearing the hum. It threaded through every room of the house, like a heartbeat echoing from the walls. Jonas sat awake by the table, notebook scattered, his eyes fixed on a single shard Hyde kept. In its depths, a tiny version of the attic shimmered, and within it, Evelyn could see the two of them, sitting just as they were. "It's showing us now." Jonas murmured. But as they leaned closer, their reflections began to shift. In the shard, Jonas turned his head toward the real Evelyn and whispered something she couldn't hear. Then he smiled, and the reflection of her did not. Jonas believed they could end it. That if they returned the shards to where the mirror once hung, the reflections would quiet. Evelyn followed him up the attic stairs again, though her heart warned her otherwise. They laid each piece back into the empty frame. The gold rim seemed to drink in the fragments eagerly. When the final shard was placed, a low sound vibrated through the boards beneath their feet. Jonas exhaled shakily. "It's done." But Evelyn knew better. The mirror's surface reformed, rippling like water, and from within it, their reflections began to move without them. The reflections stepped closer to the glass. Faces dimly lit from an unseen fire within their world. Evelyn felt the air grow colder, heavier, the sound of her pulse drowning out everything else. "It's not a reflection anymore," she whispered. Jonas reached toward the glass, unable to look away. The reflection of his hand met his touch, perfectly aligned, and for a heartbeat, the line between them vanished. Evelyn screamed as the mirror rippled violently, swallowing Jonas' hand up to his wrist. His eyes met hers in horror as the reflection grinned. Then, in one smooth motion, the glass stilled, and Jonas was gone. The silence after Jonas vanished was almost beautiful. Evelyn sat frozen before the mirror, her breath shallow, her mind refusing to understand what her eyes had seen. The glass was perfectly still again, its surface reflecting nothing but her trembling form. Then, slowly, his reflection returned. Not where it should have been, but deeper, behind a veil of shifting light. "Jonas," she whispered. His figure moved, pressing a hand against the inside of the glass. But the smile was wrong, the head tilt, too precise. "Come closer," his reflection said in his voice, though she could see his lips didn't move. Her tears streaked down her face. "What are you?" she breathed. The mirror whispered back, "Tomorrow." Evelyn did not run. Some part of her believed Jonas was still inside, trapped, calling for her beneath the mimic's voice. She took a deep breath, feeling the floor tremble beneath her knees. The mirror's light pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, the air humming like a drawn-out note. "If I look again," she whispered, "it will take me too." But even as she said it, she stood, her hand outstretched. The reflection of Jonas mirrored her perfectly now, every breath aligned. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "let him go." The mirror answered by opening slightly, its surface softening like mist, revealing a dark corridor within. The air inside the mirror tasted like dust and silence. Evelyn stepped cautiously, her bare feet touching what felt like glass that shifted beneath her steps. All around her were reflections, endless, overlapping, whispering versions of herself, walking slightly out of sync. The corridor pulsed with dim light, echoing faintly with the sound of the old piano. "Jonas," she called, her voice swallowed by the walls. Ahead, she saw him, or what looked like him, standing before another mirror, identical to the first. He turned slowly, his eyes blank, his mouth whispering something her ears couldn't hear. She ran toward him, but each step made the space stretch farther away. Outside, the real attic was no longer quiet. The mirror's glow spilled across the walls, flickering like firelight. The air hummed with low vibration, as if 1,000 heartbeats pulsed in unison. From the reflection's side, Jonas double-turned toward the open doorway of the corridor, sensing Evelyn's approach. His smile softened into something human, almost gentle. "It's easier here," he said, though his voice came from every surface at once. No pain, no time, only reflection. Evelyn shook her head, trembling. "You're not him." He took a step closer, eyes glimmering faintly with blue light. "Not yet," he replied. Evelyn's hands shook as she reached out, pressing her palm to his chest. It felt solid, cold, like marble beneath her skin. "You're not him," she whispered again, her tears falling soundlessly. The reflection's hand lifted, resting gently against her cheek. "Then make me real," it said softly. For an instant she saw Jonas, his warmth, his eyes, his kindness, flicker behind the stranger's gaze. The mirrored world trembled, rippling outward as if the glass itself were breathing. Evelyn took one breath, then another, and whispered, "Then I'll take you with me." She pulled him forward. The corridor imploded into light. Light exploded around her, then faded into gray silence. Evelyn awoke on the parlor floor, her body trembling, the mirror standing whole again against the wall. Jonas lay beside her, motionless but breathing. His face looked softer than before, peaceful, almost too still. She reached out, whispering his name, and his eyes opened. For a heartbeat, relief filled her chest. But then he smiled, slow, unfamiliar. "You found me," he said gently. She froze. His voice carried a strange echo, like two people speaking at once. "Jonas?" she asked. He tilted his head, the motion precise. "You brought me back," he whispered. "You shouldn't have." For hours, they sat in silence. Jonas spoke softly, as if trying to remember his own voice. His sentences came smooth, but strange, too measured, like reading a script. Evelyn watched him, memorizing every movement, searching for something that was missing. When she asked what he remembered, he said only, everything that mattered. Then his eyes drifted to the mirror. "It's quieter now," he murmured. "Do you hear it?" Evelyn listened. The hum that had haunted the house for days was gone. The silence felt heavy, too heavy. And then she realized it wasn't quiet at all. The hum was still there, but now it was coming from him. Evelyn wrote in Clara's old notebook, her hand shaking. Each page became harder to finish. Words seemed to fade after she wrote them. Jonas spent most of the night staring into the mirror, whispering things she couldn't quite catch. Once, she heard her own name and looked up. But his mouth hadn't moved. "You need to rest," she said gently, but he didn't answer. His reflection did, though, mouthing the words, "Stay with me." The lights flickered once. When she turned the page, the paper rippled beneath her fingers, showing faint outlines of faces pressed from the other side. That night, Evelyn awoke to find Jonas standing by the mirror again. His fingertips pressed against the glass. "Jonas," she whispered. But he didn't turn. The reflection moved instead, smiling gently. She stepped closer, and the air grew icy, her breath visible. "What do you see?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he murmured. "It's beautiful there." Evelyn shook her head, tears forming. "It's not real." He finally turned to her, his face illuminated by the faint blue glow. "Neither is this," he said quietly. His reflection stayed behind, smiling even after he looked away. When dawn came, Evelyn found Jonas gone. The mirror stood uncovered, its surface blank and cold. But as light filled the parlor, she saw movement within, a faint silhouette walking toward her from the other side. She stepped closer, heart hammering, and whispered his name. The figure stopped, close enough that she could almost touch him. But it wasn't Jonas' face that looked back. It was hers, older, eyes hollow and weary. "Don't look again," her reflection said. The voice trembled with fear. Evelyn stumbled back, the notebook falling from her hand. The last page turned itself in the breeze, the ink spelling words she had never written. Some never stop looking. Some never wake. The morning passed in fragments. Evelyn could not tell when she last blinked, or if she had slept at all. The house seemed too quiet, the air thick with a silence that felt alive. Every mirror, every window pane caught her reflection at strange angles, all showing her slightly delayed, like echoes of a heartbeat too slow. She spoke softly, as if afraid to wake something. "Jonas?" she whispered to the emptiness. The name lingered, repeating faintly from the hallway, from the piano, from the glass. When she turned, her reflection waited beside her. "You shouldn't have looked," it said. The clock struck midnight, though the night had not yet begun. Evelyn lit a single candle and walked toward the attic, the wooden steps groaning beneath her weight. The mirror's faint hum guided her like a pulse, steady and patient. When she reached the top, she found it already uncovered, gleaming softly in the dark. The reflection inside was not the attic. It was her parlor, as it would be tomorrow. The sunlight fell across the room, and in the chair sat Jonas, smiling faintly, waiting. "You said tomorrow," she whispered. His reflection nodded once, And tomorrow always comes. She reached toward the mirror once more. The glass was warm, almost breathing beneath her fingers. In the reflection, Jonas stood, mirroring her movement. But his eyes were not the same. They shimmered with faint blue light. "If I open it again," she said softly, "I'll never come back." His reflection smiled. "That's what you said last time." The words froze her. "Last time," she whispered. And as she watched, the reflection changed, showing herself stepping into the mirror, again and again, in endless loops. Each version a little older, a little more lost. The house began to hum again, deep, resonant, alive. The mirror pulsed brighter, filling the attic with trembling light. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to see tomorrow," she whispered. "Then stop looking," came Clara's voice. Soft and near, Evelyn turned. Her grandmother's reflection stood in the glass beside Jonas, her expression sorrowful. "Close your eyes," Clara said. Evelyn obeyed. The mirror's hum grew softer, slower, until it matched her heartbeat. Then silence. When she opened her eyes again, the mirror was dark. Only her reflection remained. But behind it, faintly, another pair of eyes watched. At dawn, the mirror was gone. The attic floor was bare, except for the faint outline where it once stood. Evelyn walked slowly through the house, every step echoing too loud in the quiet. She found the piano open, a single note pressed down, humming softly on its own. In the kitchen, the old notebook lay waiting, a new line written in her own handwriting. "You looked again." She touched the ink. It was still wet. She turned toward the window and froze. In the reflection of the glass, Jonas stood behind her, smiling faintly, whispering words she couldn't hear. And in that moment, Evelyn understood. Tomorrow had already begun.